Charlie Gaudet's been called the go-to coach for 7 and 8-figure entrepreneurs for a reason. As CEO of Predictable Profits, he helps companies design strategies that help them grow through those plateaus that stall most companies. So we tapped him for how do you really do scaling? What's real execution look like? And then a new perspective on R&D, not for your products, for your business. I'm Bryon Morrison. Let's get to the leaders list.
Everything is happening through these screens.
How are we getting the most out of that person?
I want to see this thing grow long term.
Amazing story. You have such a unique perspective on that.
Schedule a 2-week vacation.
I applaud those models.
Undervalue.
Secure your digital footprint as well.
Why were they even put in place in the first place?
Only the most adaptable survive. Let's get to the leaders list. Charlie Gaudet of Predictable Profits. We're so glad to have you on the leaders list.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Man, I've been looking forward to this one for a while. You are recognized as one of the top strategists and business coaches literally around the globe. And so can't wait to learn from you. And I always talk to people about, on the leaders list, I like to have people who are actually building and they're actually growing their own company, and they're, doing what they say they tell other people to do, as opposed to just being that coach who just talks and doesn't do. So I know that you've done that, and I just want to give you the opportunity to tell us a little bit about, specifically, let's talk about Predictable Profits. Let's talk about the business you have created.
Sure. And actually, you just brought up something. So even before we talk about me, I just want to bring one more thing up. When you mentioned about me basically eating my own pudding, right?
Yeah. Right.
What we consistently see over and over and over and over again, the people that eat their own pudding, the companies that basically do the same stuff for themselves that they do for others, provides an enormous competitive advantage. So for all of us that at one point leaned on the old excuse, cobbler's kids have no shoes, that doesn't fly anymore. And so I would just highly encourage our listeners, right, to get an advantage as we move forward. Make yourself the first client, and make sure that you do for yourself what you do for everybody else. It's really, really important nowadays, because authenticity and transparency is even more prevalent today with AI and so forth. We have this hairpin trigger, this sensitivity that if you say something and it just doesn't feel connected or authentic, we immediately begin to lose the reader or lose the prospect. And so, but when you do it and you can speak from experience, people know it. Even if it's from an unconscious level, they know the difference between somebody speaking from experience versus somebody speaking from, a book or a course or something like that. So I just felt the need to bring that up because it is incredibly important and critical today.
Charlie, I love to start with a mic drop moment right out of the gate. That was a great point. Love it. All right, so tell us about what you do at Predictable Profits.
Got it. So I've been an entrepreneur since the age of 4. Never had a traditional quote unquote real job. After graduating college, I started a business that was nominated by Ernst & Young as being one of the nation's top seed stage companies. By 24, I created my first multi-million-dollar business. And then after that, I just continued to build and grow companies until 2010. That's when somebody offered to pay me to help them grow their company. And I started Predictable Profits over here. We've helped many, many companies joined the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies list. Recently helped an agency go from 950,000 to about 66 million in a few years. Just with the work that we've done too, really since 2020. It's got the attention of the press. We had the International Business Times do a featured story on me, calling me the go-to business coach for 7 and 8-figure companies. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, MSN named me the leading coach for 8 and 9-figure CEOs. DM News named me as the #1 marketing and sales thought leader in 2025. There's just been a whole bunch of like top lists, this and that. But the reality is first, it has nothing to do with me. Even though, I happen to be the figurehead, and I get the press. I'd be remiss if I didn't give the acknowledgement where it deserves, and that is number one, my team. But it also speaks to the frameworks and the systems that we use, and it's really just that, the frameworks, the operating system. But people come to us at Predictable Profits asking one of three questions. They're saying, what does it take to grow my company faster? Or they might say, some months are feast, some months are famine. How do I create more predictability? The third one is just, look, companies do depend on me. How do I escape that founder's trap and move on? And I think, Bryon, between you and I, one of the things that I love about all our conversations is that there's this intellectual ping pong that we get to play with one another, and your skills are different than my skills. And while you mentioned earlier that you learned from me, in all of our conversations, I've always walked away just hearing and learning from you a different perspective that I hadn't heard before. And that's something else in this fast-paced world where things are moving so fast. If you think that you can do anything in a silo nowadays, there's no competitive advantage in that at all. You need to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you and can bring new perspectives.
Man, I love that. And very kind of you to say it, but I feel the exact same way. And one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on the show is because I tend to look at things from how does the organization operate past their constraints?
Yeah.
And how do they close the execution gap? What I love about your perspective is the way you bring a team together to give strategic counsel top down and help an organization see like what's most important right now. And so that's why I think we do have such a cool conversation every time we start from this, because we look at it from different perspectives, but understand each other's connection to it. So specifically, tell everybody like how you work with these entrepreneurs, because I think some people might look at this and go, oh, Charlie's the coach, that's it.
Sure.
But I do know that you have a system and you've got a team. And so talk a little bit about that so everybody can understand the difference.
Sure. So, way back, we used to do all this one-on-one coaching. And then as the world evolved and things just happened, there are just so many things happening so fast. And it was actually our clients that said to us, hey, you tend to work with some of the smartest, most successful people on the planet. It'd be really cool if there was an opportunity for us to get together and learn from one another. So our clients were the ones that actually drove the change in the business. And so we started bringing people together, and that was the first big change. So, you bring 6, 7, 8-figure entrepreneurs together to discuss, here's what's working, here's the different challenges, because we've all sort of like gone somewhere, faced different challenges that other people have already accomplished and or have been through, and it's sharing. But then we also realized that we could help to support the teams, and because, as you mentioned earlier, we do this stuff every single day. Rather than me or one coach teaching something like outbound marketing, wouldn't it be better to talk to the guy that has literally sent out millions of outbound messages, that's testing different angles and software and approaches, every single day, every single week? Don't you want to just hear directly from him instead of a coach who's playing telephone between, hey, what worked? And the same thing with sales or operations or marketing and so forth. So we ended up just creating this more of a robust infrastructure that can support each client based on the roadmap that they've been handed. So they all have a roadmap, a strategic roadmap that they got to get done. And it's like, all right, this is what you need to do. This is the person who has got specialized experience in this. You're in a room with everybody else focused on that same core area. And then, you bounce these ideas and it's awesome. And even with all the experience that I've had, every single time that I'm with my clients, I walk away with notes. It's like I get paid to learn because, you've got these people that are just they're brilliant, and they're just super, super generous with their time and their experience. And I mean, Bryon, I know you see this because you work with companies in a whole variety of industries. When you're in masterminds, the exact same industry the whole time, you end up in an echo chamber with everybody copying each other,
Yes.
right? And it's hard to stand out. But when you're in a group of diversified professionals, you might see, I mean, we've got a gentleman right now who is in B2B funeral,
Death care.
death care sales, right? And it's like, and he can contribute to somebody who might be an agency, right?
Totally.
And share the different experiences, or somebody who's in cyber security. And it's awesome to get these different perspectives. So
Well, and it's interesting because at different growth stages that becomes vital, right? In the early stages, you actually need to have people who are thinking like you. They can understand what you expect because you are the person. You have to be the person in that early stage. But once you move into stage 2, 3, 4, you have to start thinking, certainly by stage 5, you've got to have diversity
Right.
of mindset, just an outside perspective. But what I love about you guys and what you do is it's almost like a plugged in advisory board.
Yeah.
And having served on the board of a lot of small to medium sized businesses, you can walk into that and see the immediate impact just from having a unique perspective. So, a lot of companies that we talk to them about building an advisory board when they're ready. But I love the fact that you guys basically build that in and give that to them in a consistent, easy structure. So at minimum, it teaches them how to work with an advisory board before they're ready.
That's why we, our clients, we used to only work with 7 and 8 figure companies. I mean, the 9-figure companies, I don't talk about them much because they just actively seek us out. We don't traditionally market to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was only this year that we started to open it up to 6-figure companies that just kind of reach a certain revenue or maturity stage, so be it. Because as I tell my clients, it's like, somebody might come in and be like, well, like the funeral guy, as an example. He's like, do you have any experience in my industry? And I'm like, hold on a minute. Let me tell you something. You don't need me to tell you how to run the funeral business. So if that's a conversation that we're having, I'm not going to be the right guy. However, one thing that we know better than anybody else is how to get buyers. And we understand the buyer's journey. We understand what moves people from, B2B or B2C. Like, we understand that element of it, from how to attract buyers, how to convert those buyers. And then also the architecture of a scaling organization. We understand that. So as long as you're world-class at what you do and your delivery, we're world-class at what we do, we'll meet in the middle and we'll solve for that. And, that's why we've been able to work with 52, 55, something like that, different industries. Because just because like you're buying for funeral doesn't all of a sudden mean like, the buyer is so wildly different when they go through, something else. The buying psychology is the same. The way they go through that buying process is the same. There's going to be different nuances.
Yeah,
right?
there's a need state. Need state's very different, obviously, but that's not different than other highly emotional, immediate decision making. And then you go, all right, I've worked in 20 other industries that look exactly like that. And that's the part that I agree with you. I don't think people recognize enough of, the lookalikes from a process perspective. And I'll give you an example. One client I worked with was housing industry, and then we were thinking about what are the right models and how do you build around this, and it was funny because we were like, well, it's very similar to the work that we did around pregnancy and childbirth. It's a 9-month gestation period. It's need for consistent communication at various key stages. Understanding of the process allows you to take ownership of it. And it was laughable because the buying process is very similar. So you learn a ton about the emotional aspect when you take it from, takes this long to make a baby and it takes this long to build a house. And you go, okay, these are highly emotional moments. And so there was a ton of share that went back and forth between that.
The most successful founders that I have ever met before in my entire life, they never meet someone or a situation and ask, does this apply to me? Everybody thinks they're different. Totally get that. And we are all different. But the most successful people that I know, they always ask, how does this apply to me? Even something as simple as, say you jump in an Uber and you're having a conversation with an Uber driver. A lot of people might just sit there and go, I'm just going to stay quiet and whatnot. But, the other people who have this intellectual curiosity might sit there and just ask, what can I learn from this Uber driver? We got 45 minutes right now. Like, what can I learn from this Uber driver? And the more intellectually curious you become about other businesses, other situations, other people, other engagements, that's a massive, massive, massive superpower.
Yeah. So let's go back to your organization and the growth stage that you're in. How would you describe that? And what's on your leaders list? It's always interesting to hear from the people who are actually building companies and thinking this way. I'd love to know what's on your list.
You know what? In terms of growth stage, especially now more than ever, I feel like we're still of a very much startup mentality. And the reason why I say that is things are changing so fast. In January of 2026, we had more advances in technology and AI than we did all throughout history. And then all of a sudden you hit the first week in February, and the first week of February just completely eclipsed all of January. So if you asked me before all of this AI, it would be much more of a steady, consistent, predictable, just steady flow of more mature growth. But now we've taken a step back and we're saying, look, we've got to look and continuously find ways to we're not reinventing. That's not the right word. It's, how do we remain relevant? How do we maintain our competitive advantage? Because every single one of us has been disrupted. Every single one of us will continue to be disrupted. So if innovation isn't on the forefront of your mind right now, there's going to be a reckoning at some point, in the near future. And 2026 is a pivotal moment for almost every industry out there right now. So, that's kind of like the mindset that we're in terms of like the growth stage that, we're just we're changing so many things right now. Mindset.
And let me ask you real quick on that though, Charlie. So when you're going through that, I think every organization probably thinks about or has some division of, once you get to a certain size, of R&D.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about is right now, like you're not stopping marketing, you're not stopping sales, you're not stopping culture and HR, you're not
leaning in.
But you are definitely leaning into an R&D mindset. And that's something that every one of the listeners, I agree with you, should be thinking about. If I don't have a mindset around R&D and around test and learn and around obviously AI, but if I don't have that mindset and I'm not putting structure and operationalizing that, putting structure around it, then they will look up and they're going to be behind. So it makes a ton of sense that you're in that mindset.
So I had a venture capitalist reach out to me, and he said to me, "So I need to wrap my head around something. Maybe you could help me." And I'm like, "Yeah, what's up?" And he said, "How are you able to generate these results that are just so uncommon in the industry? Is it some sort of tactic? Is it like what's going on here?" And I said, "Man, I'm going to tell you." Outside of the framework, which, the predictable profits operating system that we've been discussing, I'm almost embarrassed to tell you because it is so boring and unexciting. I'm definitely, gonna break any paradigm that you might think of me. And he's like, what is this? I go, we call it the OSI method: optimization, systemization, and then innovation. So you have to first optimize the stuff that you've got going on right now. Once you optimize all that, you put it into a system. So okay, we've got it perfectly dialed in. Boom. You put it into a system. You have the right KPIs. You know what's working, what's not working, and only then are you able to free yourself from all the weight there being on your shoulders to then innovate. And then you can either create something new or test something that's that breaks. And he started screaming over the phone. He goes, "You effing get it. You effing get it. Oh my God, you effing get it." But that innovation mindset, that only comes after you've optimized what you're currently doing and that you put it into a system. And I say that because I don't want our listeners to get the wrong idea. I don't want them to be like, I heard you, I'm going to go jump to this. I'm going to go jump to this. I'm going to go jump to this and then jump to this. Because an object in motion stays in motion. An object at rest stays at rest. The reason why most people fail when they launch these new initiatives is because they start a new initiative. They don't get the results as quickly as they want. So they let it go and they go to a new one and they start it. They don't get the results when they need. They let it go and they do another one. So when they start a new initiative, there's no momentum. There's no motion. The motion that we're looking for as we're growing a company is data. As I spoke to somebody this morning, they were about to launch a new initiative. I said, I want to make sure you understand and set the expectations realistically. The first 90 days, let go of this idea of conversion. Focus more on the data, focus more on the results. You are investing in data. That means you're going to be looking at all the components of this system that you're running and say, what's working, what's not working, and get crystal clear on that. And you'll do more of what's working, you'll do less of what's not, because inevitably, anytime you approach something like that, you begin to learn that everything works and nothing works at the same time. In other words, it is never, and I see this, one of the biggest business media companies in the world, they actually hired me to help them with their lead gen strategy. And initially they said, we need more leads. I said, well, what are we talking about here? What we're doing isn't working. So they were ready to just throw the strategy out with the bathwater. Sure. And so I said, with all due respect, I seldom let the client diagnose themselves. You don't let the patient diagnose themselves if you're in medical. I don't. So I said, before we do anything, I'd like to look under the hood, pull things apart, kind of see what's happening so that we can properly determine the next step forward. So reluctantly, he said, okay. It wasn't 30 minutes into our first coaching session that we discovered that the calendar invites that should have been going out were not going out. And so all of these leads that he thought were garbage because nobody's showing up to the calls, this is garbage, the strategy's not working, blah, blah. The calendar invites weren't going out.
Yeah, broken touch point.
The moment that was identified and fixed, he went from we need more leads to we have too many leads. What are we supposed to do? But and this isn't just one situation. This happens almost all the time.
Yeah.
People say this isn't working. You pull back a little bit and you fix it. Most of the time when we're working with a client, the first thing we're trying to say is you don't need to do more. You just need to do better what you're already doing. So let's make sure we understand everything that you're doing right now so that performs much better. And then we can go ahead and we can add more to that.
Yeah. What you just described is the same thing that we tend to look at when we talk about initiatives and launching initiatives, how do most people do it? They go, well, I looked into it. I want this. I set my objectives, and then I'm going to throw it over the fence, and I want somebody else to work on it, and they can't figure out why. Just like you said, it's all of
Yeah.
those things. It fails. We talk about, like, be aware there are distinct phases of an initiative. Research is the first phase.
Yeah.
It's that hypothesis, the levers I'm going to pull, the
Yeah.
things I'm going to test, not the output.
Yeah.
Do I understand the levers? So you go through this research perspective, then you build the plan.
Yeah.
And then you're taking all that data that you've been working with, just like you said, it's all data. So research, plan, launch, because then
Yes.
you can look at whether or not I had the right levers, whether or not my plan was right, and then how it was received, and then improve. And if you just take that with any initiative that you're executing and give yourself that ability to say, I may not know all the answers right now, so I'm gonna research, I'm gonna test. Then you can fail and you go, I feel good about failing. That
Yeah.
was great. And then the last part of that is improve. And you know how many times people don't, they go, I tried it, didn't work, now what? So it's exactly, that's why I love talking to you about this stuff, because that's how we institutionalize it. Teaching those 4 distinct stages per initiative is incredibly important.
So between my wife and I, we invested $250,000 traveling around with Tony Robbins back in 2005, thereabouts, right? And through that, we learned Tony had a mentor, when he was a bit younger. His name is Marshall Thurber. And somehow, somewhere, Marshall and I became connected, and eventually we became business partners. And as we're launching this business, Marshall said to me, he goes, hey, can you tell me about this result? And I was like, yeah, this is kind of what's going on. He goes, can I see the data? I don't have it. And he goes, well, how do you know that that's a result? I just know. I just been doing this. I just know. Hey guys, I bring me the data. Well, okay, whatever. Comes back in my office the next day. Hey, can you tell me? So what happened here? Oh, this is what happened. Why? Well, because of this and that. Well, where's the data? Again, I didn't have the data. The third time, apparently I must have been a slow learner. Third time, I gave him the same response. His face turned beet red. He clenched his fists, and now he's smashing his fists on my desk, and he yells, there are reasons and results. The only things that matter are the results. Bring me the data. And I was like, whoa, okay. From that point forward, that was such a wake-up call and a gift at the same time. Myself, my team, my clients, everything, we do the same thing. We don't want to hear reasons. Let's look granularly and let's get the data. Let's look at the results. Yeah. The moment we started making data-based decisions, everything changed. And that's permeated its way into just our culture as a whole. We'll have team members who will come to us with ideas. And they'll say, hey, what do you think about this? And so a lot of teams will sit there and they'll debate and they'll debate and they'll debate. And it might go on for days or weeks or months. Maybe eventually they just don't even do it. If we don't have data and it's solving a constraint or it's creating an opportunity, our gut response is, well, let's test it and go for the data. I have been humbled more times than I care to admit by believing that it wouldn't work. Like, thank God nobody asked me to put my life on the line, because there were a few times I was so convinced that it wouldn't work, I probably would have taken them up on that bet, only to be humbled with it going the other way. So that's happened enough times that now, as long as it just sounds like a reasonable type of request, let's test it. I don't know. Let's test it. And many times that's where the breakthroughs happen, because we just don't know. And what's the whole point of debating it? Because nobody knows. Nobody has the data.
Yeah. Yeah, and we all run by standards that we think, like, people say, well, what should the results be? I can give you industry standards, but there's also a tremendous number of variables that are your variables. So testing within your own environment, building that big tent mentality of thinking about data and using that and being consistent about testing. I love it. I mean, I'm in the same place. I've gotten to a point in my career where I go, look, I've got a pretty good gut and I've seen a lot, but the answer will always be we should test.
In the industry, by the way, is by and large mediocre. Every industry by and large is mediocre. You just look at like industry standards, but you look at the way that most businesses operate. They have, mediocre standards and mediocre strategy, and they're very complacent. Very, very, very complacent. If you look at the way most companies end up generating new business, it's from hard work, word of mouth, and referrals. There's not a lot of companies have very deep strategic intent to what they're doing. They might think they have strategy, but it's not necessarily strategy. It's more so of either a vision that they're moving towards or a concept, but there's a real difference between that and like real tactical strategy, right? Mm-hmm. And even something as simple as, I had this conversation with the CEO doing $500 million, right? And he says to me, yeah, Charlie, we do marketing. And I was like, what does that mean? He says, well, we do marketing. He says, you can't do marketing. He says, what? I go, nobody can do marketing. It's like me saying, I do doctor. You can't do marketing. I go, marketing itself, there are functions to marketing. So let's break this down. And then you kind of help me understand, how are you creating demand? How effective are you at creating demand? And he looked at me like I was speaking another language. And he was like, I don't know. Okay. Well, how effective are you at capturing that demand? And he goes, oh, okay. Well, we thousands, blah, blah, blah leads per day. Okay. Got it. Awesome. What about nurturing that demand? How effective are you at nurturing that demand? He goes, I really don't know. So I said, look, here we are. We're talking about growing the company. You're asking me different questions about whether or not it makes sense to put your money here, to put your money here, and so forth. You've just admitted that 2/3 of your entire marketing function are operating in the dark. Do we understand where the opportunities are now? And he was like, oh man. But this is kind of what I'm talking about. Even the $500 million companies, like, they're not breaking it down at a very strategic, granular level. They're like, yeah, we do marketing. But what does that mean when you really break it into those phases,
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's, those are normally those are done early, right? I mean, like, you start to, you go through your consumer journey, right? Or your customer journey, and you map those things and you start to understand it. A whole lot of companies have never taken the time to do that, but they've been successful anyway. And so, that happens. And, there's a whole different set of reasons for that. Like these legendary founders they're a force to be reckoned with. And they do just drive it. But
you're right.
The science of moving beyond that entrepreneur and then starting to create a really solid company that has predictable profits, that requires, the homework that a lot of times didn't get done. So I can understand why a $500 million company would say something like that to you.
Yeah. Or they go ahead and they hire an agency to do to map out the customer journey for them. But they don't really understand like what that means.
Right.
And when you look at like how a lot of people map out the customer journey, it's often built on an ideal client profile, right? Instead of actually taking a step back and being like, let's take a look at let's go in the data. Who are the clients that are generating, it's the 80-20 rule. Well, the 20% of clients that are generating 80% of the profits, like what do they have in common? Let's figure out what they have in common. Let's reverse engineer. Let's try to, figure out what that is. Instead, they just kind of like sit down with the team and they're like, tell me about like your ideal client. And that
believe an ideal client. When we talk about the Pareto rule of 80-20, it's really Pareto plus, right? It's the 5%.
Yeah, you're right.
How to
yes, you are very right.
How do we get to the absolute ideal customer? And then you start to understand, which is even when we talk about ICP, I always move everybody to TAM, SAM, SUM. And let's get into the inner layer of that service obtainable business that I have the right to win, and I know I'm going to win it. And when I win it, it looks like all these great ICP customers that I've already got. And that's a huge distinction a lot of people miss, right?
Massive.
One is analyzing the opportunity. The other is analyzing the customer and the success you've had. So, having those two things work together, fantastic. Talking about them like they're the same thing, nightmare.
And you're right. And at the very basic level, and Bryon, obviously, like you're very, you could just tell on talking with you, like you're seasoned, you've got a lot of experience because like you've been down the road enough times. Like you could just tell, right? Kind of like we talked about before, the authenticity, right? But
I'm 20. I dyed my hair.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, right.
But at the very basic level, right? So now, we call it super consumers. Some people call it like ICP or whatever it is, right? Yep. But at the very basic level, right? When people are like, they're struggling to generate leads, they're struggling to fill in the pipeline or whatnot, like they don't have that super consumer, right? So if they don't have it, but then you go to the website and you go to their website, the website doesn't call out who it's for. Because the first thing you do when you go to a website is you're like, am I at the right place? Well, if you're not calling out the super consumer, then they're not sure. So now they're looking around to figure out if they're in the right place. They want to know, are you solving my problem? But if they're not clear and I haven't identified the problem, and then people, I don't know. So now I got to dig in a little bit deeper and see, can they solve my problem? What makes you uniquely better than everybody else? What is that unique advantage? And again, it's kind of like, it's not there. So, they might be busy trying to build tactics and strategies and everything else. Go, I don't understand. Why isn't this working? I took this outbound course and it's still not working. I'm doing everything that they said. I'm running my Facebook strategies and I'm doing everything it's not working. When you understand the whole buyer's journey as a whole, and it's like, look, buyers are researchers and they will go to your website. They want to learn more about you. But if it doesn't feel like they're in the right place, that you're solving the problem, remember, everybody feels like they're different. What they can't tell what makes you uniquely better than everybody else. They're not going to be like, okay, I'm going to respond to this outbound message because you hit me with this clever, subject line or whatnot. Be like, I'm not going to waste my time. This isn't relevant to me.
Yeah, it's not for me.
It's not for me. Yeah.
So, Charlie, let's talk about, we understand what you're going through. We understand you've given us a ton of great stuff on what's on your leaders list and how you think. But if you're going to give our listeners the key things that should be on their leaders list that they're going to be analyzing and they're going to be thinking about, because they're going to stop listening to this and they're going to go to work. If they're not, then they haven't been paying attention, right? They're going to build out their R&D mindset and they're going to make changes. But I know you guys have some pretty distinct operating system recommendations. And so I just want to be able to make sure that everybody hears that and starts thinking about how it matches their leaders list.
Sure. And there's so many different things we can go into. I mean, there's literally, this podcast could be 6 hours long.
Yeah, for sure.
But if we bring it down to like the absolute essentials, right? What we know is that setup is the foundation behind sales. Sales is the foundation that supports scale. So if we say, okay, setup is the foundation that supports everything. What is setup? Setup is what we talked about earlier. It's all the different ways you are creating demand, capturing that demand, and then nurturing that demand, right? And so we know that our buyers have changed over the years. In 2019, the average person looked at 17 different sources of information before making a buying decision. And 2021, that turned into 27. Then last year, I believe it was somewhere around 36 different sources of information before making a buying decision. Again, buyers have become researchers. They go through this cycle of exploration and evaluation and exploration and evaluation. And so you need to have that setup so dialed in during that investigative process that the buyer is going through, so that by the time they move on to sales, they are then buyer ready. In other words, sales job is not to carry the entire organization. In fact, by the year 2030, 100%, not 90, not 95, but 100% of all buying decisions will happen during a rep-free experience. Rep-free experience. It doesn't matter if it's $1 million, 500,000, and I have the data to support it. I've got data from McKinsey. I've got data from Forrester or Gartner, one of those two or whatnot, to support this argument here. Now, because buyers will make a decision, I want to work with you, before agreeing to get on a call. But once they get on a call, then they're going to say, all right, here's the deal. Bryon, this is awesome. I love you guys. Just got a question about, like, can we do this? So it's going to be a little bit more customization, or you're going to work through legal or whatever it might be. But they've already decided, man, I want to work with you. You're awesome. And then as you're able, sales is making sure you have that scalable team that doesn't depend on the founder and so forth, consistent playbooks. You want recurring revenue. At least 50% of all your revenue should be recurring revenue, not reoccurring, but recurring. So big difference, right? But recurring revenue. And then that helps to support scale, right? And scale is everything that it's the systems, it's the people, it's the org chart, it's culture and everything else. But if it's kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Real easy to tell people, focus on culture and everything. But if you're still fighting for survival and, payroll, it doesn't matter what your culture looks like. You got to feel like you're confident enough in your future and in the pipeline. That's why it's set up, sales, and scale. That's the way that our mindset and our strategy and our leadership is all set up.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I'll tell you, like you said, we could go for easily another 10 hours on this, and we'll definitely have you back, and we'll go through that process. But we'll wait until you figure out what you're going through in this pivotal change and pivotal time, because I can't wait to see what predictable profits becomes as you guys stay in front of AI and keep working with it and changing.
And the reality is whatever I tell you today, it could even evolve by this same time tomorrow. And all organizations are needing to adapt a very agile mindset. And it's not just my industry that's changing. It's my clients that are changing. It's their clients that are changing. So how are we able to make sure that we're adapting and evolving to be able to support them? I didn't say we have to break things and create new things. We have to create our new model. It's like, okay, well, what is going on and how do we evolve to best support them? Right? It's just kind of like a storm's coming. Okay, let's kind of move this direction. Let's move this direction. And it's making sure that they're heard, that we're not tone deaf, that we understand what's keeping them up at night. I'll kind of finish off with this last thing, because I think it's important, especially where there's so much confusion. Right now you can go online and you can build a website for free with AI, right? Or maybe spend a little bit, go to Lovable, tell what you want, build a website like this for $50, right? Super easy. I was on the phone with the CEO who's doing $50 million in website design. His whole company is based on website design. And so I said, with all due respect, how worried are you about AI and the way that it's going to disrupt your model, especially with all these free tools available? And he goes, you kidding me? I'm psyched. I am so excited. This is actually going to help our business even further. It's okay. Help me understand what's going through your minds.
Please share.
Please, yeah. And he goes, because we were never in the website business. I said, I got it. And he goes, we were always in the problem solving business. See, we help agencies solve problems better than anybody else in the world. And so it just so happens that we're doing that through websites, but AI is going to allow us to produce things faster, more cost efficiently, everything else. If people aren't, if the results of solving that problem is not important enough to them, then they'll go ahead and they'll use those free tools. But our super consumer, our ideal client, puts value on the experience that we have to know that the websites that we build will solve the problem that they want. And you can't do that by entering a regular prompt and saying, build a website. That's the business that we're in. We're in the business of solving problems, helping our founders escape the founder's trap. You know, you're in the business of solving problems, and you do it in a very brilliant, awesome kind of way. And it's just, we just continue to lean in, focus on the problem, how we do it. The delivery might change so long as we continue to just be the best we can be in the world at solving that one problem.
Boom. Mic drop once again. Charlie Gaudet, awesome to have you on the leaders list, man. Thank you so much.
It's my honor. Thank you.